Live from New York City, it's theCUBE. Covering CyberConnect 2017. Brought to you by Centrify and the Institute for Critical Infrastructure Technology.
Okay, welcome back everyone. This is theCUBE's live coverage in New York City. This is the CyberConnect 2017 presented by Centrify, underwritten by Centrify's industry event. I'm John Ferrer, Dave Vellante. Next guest is Byron Acohido, who's the journalist and lastwatchdog.com. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to theCUBE.
Thank you, pleasure to be here.
So, seasoned journalist, there's a lot to report. Cyber is great. We heard a great talk this morning around the national issues around the government, but businesses are also struggling too. That seems to be the theme of this event. It's an inaugural event.
It really is a terrific topic that touches everything that we're doing, the way we live our lives today. So yeah, this is a terrific event where some of the smartest minds dealing with it come together to talk about.
What's the top level story in your mind in this industry right now? Chaos, is it data, civil liberties, common threats? How do you stack rank the level of importance, the most important story?
You know, it really is all of the above. I had the privilege to sit at lunch with General Keith Alexander. I've seen him speak before at different security events, but so it's a small group of the keynote speakers and Tom Kemp, the CEO of Centrify. And he just like nailed it. He basically, what resonated with me was, he said basically, we're kind of like where the world was at the start of World War I, where the Russia and Germany and England, were all kind of lining up, and Serbia was in the middle, and nobody really knew the significance of what lay ahead, and the US was on the sidelines, and all these things were just going to converge and create this huge chaos. Well, that's what he compared it today, except we're in the digital space with that, because we're moving into cloud computing, mobile devices, destruction of privacy, and then now all the nation states. Russia is lining up, North Korea and Iran. We are doing it too. That was one of the most interesting things that
His rhetoric was very high on the, hey, get our act together country attitude, like we got a lot to bring to the table. He highlighted a couple use cases and some war stories that the NSA's been involved in, but almost kind of teasing out like we're kind of getting in our own way if we don't reimagine this.
Yes, he is a very great advocate for the private sector, industry, but not just industry, the different major verticals like especially the financial sector and the energy sector, to put aside some of the competitive urges they have and recognize that this is going on.
Okay, but I got to ask you, as
Sure.
a journalist, last watchdog, General Alexander definitely came down when he sort of addressed privacy and Snowden and the whole story he told about the gentleman from the ACLU who came in a skeptic and left an advocate. As a journalist whose job is to be a skeptic, did you buy that? Does your community buy that? What's the counterpoint to that narrative that we heard this morning?
Well, actually, I think you hit it right on the head. And as a journalist, why I got into this business and I'm still doing it after all these years is if I can do a little bit to shed a little bit of light on something that helps the public recognize what's going on, that's what I'm here to do. And this topic is just so rich and touches everything. And we were talking just about the nation state level of it, but really it connects down to what we're doing as a society, what Google and Facebook and Twitter how they're shaping our society and how that impacts
and we were talking
privacy.
last night, Dave, about the Twitter, Alphabet, and Google, Twitter and Facebook and Alphabet in front of the Senate hearings last week. And how it means, and he brought it up today, the common protection of America in this time, given the past election, obviously that was the context of the Google thing, really has got a whole opportunity to reimagine how we work as a society in America, but also on the global stage. You got China, Russia, and the big actors. So it's interesting, can we eventually reimagine, use this opportunity as the greatest crisis to transform the crap that's out there today, divisiveness, no trust. And we're living in an era now where, in my lifetime, I can honestly say, I've never seen it this shitty before. It's bad. It's like, the younger generation looking at us, looking at, oh, Trump this, Trump that, I don't trust anybody. And the government has an opportunity
All right, but wait a minute. So I'm not. I mean, I'm down the middle, as you know. But I'm going to play skeptic here a little bit. What I basically heard from General Alexander this morning was we got vetted by the ACLU and they threw sort of holy water on it. But and we followed the law, and I believe everything he said. But I didn't know about that law until Snowden went public, and I agree with you. Snowden should be in jail.
I didn't say that.
But you did. You
How
said
did I say
that a couple 2 years ago in the Cube. You said that. Anyway, regardless.
I don't think.
Maybe
I'm going to go find the
maybe I'm
archive.
rewriting history, but but those laws were enacted kind of in a clandestine manner. So I put it out to both of you guys. I mean, as a citizen, are you willing to say, okay, I'll give up maybe some of my privacy rights for protection?
Well,
I know where I stand on that, but I'm just asking you guys. I mean, do all your readers sort of agree with that narrative? Do all the
Well, I
Cube?
mean, if you look at the World War I example that generally brought up in lunch, I think wasn't there, but just me thinking about that, it brings up a good perspective. If you look at reinventing how society in America is done, what will you give up for safety? These are some of the questions, and what does patriotism mean? For if industry's going to work together, what does it mean to be a patriot? What I heard from the general on stage today was, we're screwed if we don't figure this out, because the war, it's coming.
Yeah.
It's happening at massive speeds.
Again, I know where I stand on this. I'm a law-abiding citizen. Go ahead and
Byron, what do you
and
think?
Snoop me, but I know people who would say no. That's the violating my constitutional rights. I don't know. I mean,
Well, yeah.
it's worth a debate. Is all I'm saying.
It's a core question to how we're living our lives today, especially here in the U.S. In terms of privacy. I think the horse has left the barn. Nobody cares about privacy if you just look at the way we live our lives, right?
Yeah.
Google and Facebook have basically thrown the privacy model that
GPS.
that came about because we went through World War I and World War II, and we wanted the right to be left alone and not have, authoritative forces following us inside the door. But now we don't live in just the physical space. We live in the
I think
the
there's new
cyberspace.
rules. I mean, you
So there is no privacy,
Don't try to paint
basically.
me into a corner here. I did maybe take some comments, but looking forward, the new realities are, there are realities happening, and I think the general illuminated a lot of those today. I've been feeling that. However, I think when you define what to me to be a patriot of the United States of America and freedom, that freedom has to be looked through the prism of the new realities. And the new realities are, as the general illuminated, there are now open public domain tools for anyone to attack the United States. Industry and government, and he brought it up. Who do they protect? The banks. So this ends up, I think, will be a generational thing that the younger generation and others will have to figure out, but the leaders in industry will have to step up. And I think that, to me, is interesting. What does that look like?
I think leadership is the whole key to this, because I think there's a lot of there's a big thread about where the burden lies. I write about that a lot as a central theme. Where is the burden? Well, each of us have a burden in this society to pay attention to our digital footprint, but it's moving and whirling so fast, and the speaker just now from U.S. Bank said there is no such thing as unprecedented. It's all ridiculous the way things are happening.
Yep.
So it has to be at the level of the leaders, a combination, and I think this is what the general is advocating, a combination of the government, as we know it, as we've built it, buying for the people, and industry recognizing that if they don't do it, regulations are going to be pushed down on it, which is already happening here in New York. New York State Department of Financial Services now imposes rules on financial services companies to protect their data, have a CISO, check their third parties. That just went in effect in March.
This is a good point. Let's unpack that, because I think that's what's new. If they don't do this, they don't partner, if governments and industry don't partner together, either collectively as a vertical or sector with the government, then the government will impose new mandates on them. Right? That's kind of what you're getting at.
It'll be a push and shove. So
Yeah.
now the push is because the industry has not acted with enough urgency, and even though that we're seeing them in the headlines, the states have California has already led the way in terms of this data loss disclosure law that now 47 states have, but it's that's just the level that government can push, and then industry has to
I got to
that.
say, I'm just being an observer in the industry. We do the Cube, but how many events will we hear the word digital transformation? If people think digital transformation is hard now, imagine if the government imposes all these restrictions.
Well, but what about GDPR? Right? How does that affect?
That's a good question, yeah.
You tell me the U.S. government is going to be
does affect.
obliged to delete private information because because of a socialist agenda, which GDPR's been called again.
Well, no, that's another one of these catalysts, or these, one of these drivers that are pushing, because if Google, we're in a global society, right?
Okay, here's my take. I'll share my opinion on this, Dave. I brought it up earlier. What General was pointing out is now the terror states now have democratized tools that other big actors are democratizing through the public domain to allow any enemy of the United States to attack with zero consequences, because they're either anonymous, but let's just say they're not anonymous. Let's just say they get caught. We can barely convert drug dealers, multiple jurisdictions in court in the world. What court is out there that will actually solve the problem? So the question is, if they get caught, what is the judicial process?
Navy SEALs?
I mean, obviously, I'm using the DEA and drug. We've been fighting drug for multiple generations, and we still have to have a process to multiple years to get that in a global court. I mean, it's hard. My point is, if we can't even figure out for drug trade, generations of data, how fast are we going to get cyber criminals?
Well, there is recognition of this, and there is work being done, but the gap is so large. Microsoft has done a big chunk of this in fighting botnets, right? So they've taken a whole legal strategy that they've managed to impose in maybe a half dozen cases the last few years, where they've legally went and got legal power to shut down hosting services that were sources of these botnets. So that's just like one piece of it.
So that's World War I analogy. Let's just take it to the cloud wars. So in a way, Dave, we asked Amazon early on, Amazon Web Services, how their security was, and you questioned maybe cloud has better security than on-premise. At that time, 8 years ago, oh my God, the cloud is so insecure. Now it looks like the cloud's more secure. So maybe it's a scale game. Cloud guys might actually be an answer if you take your point to the next level. What do you think?
Mean, you haven't, correct me if I'm wrong, but you haven't seen these kind of massive Equifax-like breaches at Amazon
that we know about.
That we know about. Well, but
what do you think? Cloud players have an opportunity?
Well, that we know about.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But I'm not saying
that. The question on the table. The question on the table is: are the cloud guys in a better position to walk around and carry the heavy stick on cyber?
Personally, I would say no question. There's homogeneity of the infrastructure, and standardization, and more automation, and
what do you think?
Machine
learning. What's your community?
I think it's partly. I think you're right, first of all, but I think it's not the full answer. I think the full answer is what the general keeps hammering on, which is private, public. There needs to be leadership. We need to connect all these things where it makes sense to connect them, and realize that there's a bigger thing on the horizon that's already, breathing down our necks, already blowing fire like a dragon at us, and it's a community
problem. The community has to solve the problem at leadership level for companies and industry, but also what the security industry has always been known for is sharing, right? The question is, can they get to a data sharing protocol?
It's more than just data sharing. I mean, he talked about that. He talked about the at lunch he did, about the ISAC sharing. He said, no, it's more, ISACs are these informational sharing by industry, by financial industry, health industry, energy industry. They share information about how they've been hacked, but he said it's more than that. We have to get together at the table and recognize where these attacks are coming, and figure out what the smart things are doing, like at the ISP level. So if the ISPs are, that's a big part of the fun. I mean, a crucial part of the funnel is where the traffic moves. That's where it needs to be done.
What about the balance of power in cyber warfare? I mean, U.S. obviously, U.S. military, industrial complex, Russia, China. Okay, we know what the balance of power is there. Is there much more of a level playing field in cyber warfare, do you think, or is it sort of mirror the size of the economy or the sophistication of the technology, or is...
No, I think you're absolutely right. There is much more of a level playing field. I mean, North Korea can come in and do this is what we know about, or we think we know about, come in and do like a WannaCry attack, develop a ransomware that actually moves on the Internet of Things to raise cash, right, for North Korea. Right, so you're absolutely right.
That's fun in their defense department.
So that, as Robert Gates said when he was on theCUBE, we have to be really careful with how much we go in the offense with cybersecurity, because we have more to lose than anybody with critical infrastructure and the banking system, the electrical grid, nuclear.
Well, I interviewed a cyber guy on theCUBE in the studio from Vidder, and Junaid Islam. He's like, we can look at geo and not have anyone outside the U.S. access our grid. I mean, no one should attack our resources from outside the U.S. to start with. So core network access has been a big problem.
Yeah, here's something, I think I can share this, because I think you said it, you wouldn't mind me sharing it. At lunch today, to your point that we have more to lose is, you know, the general said, yeah, we have terrific offensive capability. Just like in the analog world, we have all the great bombers, more bombers than anybody else, but can we stop people from getting, we don't have the comparable level of stopping. Defense, right. Same thing with cyber. He said somebody once asked him, how many of your, what percentage of your offensive attacks are successful? 100%. You know, yeah, we do have, and we saw some of that with leaks of the NSA's weapons that happened this year that gone out.
It's like Swiss cheese, the leaks are everywhere. Yeah. And there's, but the network issue, I interviewed a guy who was running one of the big ports. I won't say the city to reveal who it was, but he's like, oh my God, these guys have come in maritime network, accessing the core internet. Unvetted. Pure core access. His first job as CIO was shut down the core network. You know, so he has to put a VPN out there and segment the network and validate all the traffic coming through, but the other predecessor had direct internet access to their core network.
Yeah, I think the energy sector and you know, there's a sponsor here, ICIT, that's in the industrial control space, that I think that's where a lot of attention is going to go in the next couple of years, because as we saw with these attacks on the Ukraine, shutting down, you know, getting in there and shutting down their power grid for half a day or whatever, or with our own alleged US-owned involvement in something like Stuxnet, where we get into the power grid in Iran. Those controls are over here with a separate legacy. Once you get in, it's really easy to maneuver around. I think, you know, that needs to be all cleaned up and locked down. That's part of the
They're already in there, the malware's sitting in there. It's
we're already over there probably, I don't know that, but that's what I would guess and hope, yeah.
I don't believe anything I read these days, except for your stuff, of course, and ours. Being a journalist, what are you working on right now? I mean, obviously you're out there reporting. What are the top things you're looking at, that you're observing? What's your observation space relative to what you're feeding into your reports?
This topic, security, I'm going to retire and be long gone on. It's a terrific topic that means so much and connects to everything.
A lot of runway on this topic. Great. I mean, there's not much.
I think the whole area of right there, your mobile device and how it plugs into the cloud, and then what that portends for Internet of Things. We have this whole 10-year history of the laptops, and we're not even solving that with the servers, and now we're moving here to these mobile devices in the clouds and IoT. It just, this attack surface area is just continues to
IoT cameras, I mean, it's just...
The other thing I noticed on the Aetna's presentation this morning on the keynote, Jim, was he said a lot of times people chase the wrong attack vector because they're not sharing, literally waste cycle times on innovation.
Good point,
so it's just interesting market. Okay, final thoughts, Byron, this event. What's the significance of this event? Obviously there's Black Hat out there, the other industry events. What is so significant about CyberConnect from your perspective? Obviously, you know, our view is, you know, it's an industry conversation, it's up-leveled a bit, but it's not, you know, it's not competing with other events. Do you see it the same way? What is your perspective on this event?
You know, I think that it's properly named Connect, and I mean, I think that is right at the center of all this. When you have people like Jim Ralph from Aetna, which is doing these fantastic things in terms of, you know, protecting their network and sharing that freely, and the US Bank guy that was just on, and Verizon is talking later today. They've been in this space for a long time, sharing terrific intelligence. And then somebody like the General, and Tom Kemp, the CEO of Centrify, talking about giving visibility to that, a real key piece that's not necessarily sexy, but by locking that down, that's, you know, accessing.
How is the Centrify message being received in like the DC circles? I mean, obviously they're an enterprise, they're doing very well. I don't know if they're revenue numbers because they're private, they don't really report those. Are they well received in the DC and in the cyber communities in terms of what they do? I mean, this identity obviously is a keys to the kingdom, but you know, it used to be kind of like a fenced off area in enterprise software model. They seem to have more relevance now. Are they, is that translating for them? in the marketplace?
I would think so. I mean, the company's growing, and I think that I was just telling somebody the story they have to tell is substantive and really simple.
Yeah.
So there's some smart people over there, and I think that there are friendly ears out there to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, anything with identity. Know your customer is a big term, and you hear in blockchain and anti-money laundering, and know your customer, big term. He's seeing more of that now. Certainly seeing Facebook, Twitter, and Alphabet in front of the Senate getting peppered. I thought that was interesting. We follow those guys pretty deeply. They got hammered. I mean, they're like, what's going on? How could you let this happen? So, and not that it was national security, but it was a major FUD campaign going on those platforms. That's data, right? So it wasn't necessarily hacked per se, but great stuff. Byron, thanks for joining us here in theCUBE, appreciate it. And your website is lastwatchdog.com?
Yes.
Okay, lastwatchdog.com. Byron Okuhito here inside theCUBE. I'm John Furrier, Dave Vellante. We'll be back with more live coverage after this short break.